Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is the place where you get both a coach's and sports dietitian perspective on topics important to endurance sports, including nutrition, training, and how these impact and fit into your daily life both on and off the race course. Your host, Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian with a specialty in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins.
This is Katie from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. And if you were listening to our podcast last week, you know we had split this episode into two parts. So we actually had our first part last week. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, please go back and listen to that first, and it will make a little bit more sense. This week we are continuing on our conversation, and we'll be continuing talking about hydration and a little more in depth on caffeine and hydration and a few other topics. But like I said, if you haven't listened to part one, I do recommend going back and listening now and then finishing up with this part two. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy this second half. We do kind of jump right in to the topic. So just to know that we're just going to jump right in since we split this in half. Thank you so much and hope you enjoy.
So right now we've talked about electrolytes. We've defined what they are. We've talked about what the body is doing and why we should care about it. We've talked about the role of sugar in the delivering of these electrolytes and the assistance of the absorption. One thing that I would, and selfishly, what I'm kind of interested in is the role of caffeine.
Okay.
We know that caffeine does tend to be a little bit of a diuretic. And so I am that's probably an understatement, actually, a heavy user of caffeine. I can tell you that my method is I don't drink pre-workout like before a workout. I drink it during the workout. And I use kind of like the high test kind of like stuff where we're talking like 330 milligrams of caffeine in one bottle. And today, for instance, I did my long ride, 3 hours plus. I went through like 1.4 bottles of electrolyte and close to 1.5 bottles of pre-workout. So you're talking 330 milligrams of caffeine per bottle. So that's a lot of caffeine. So I'm expecting probably about 9 o'clock tonight, I'm going to be comatose on the couch as the caffeine leaves my system, which is what happened to me last week. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious on how does the introduction of caffeine, which is a huge we use caffeine as a race performance enhancer. You know, it delays fatigue, it masks fatigue. So, you know, if you're not using caffeine, you should have really a valid reason why you're not using it. And so I'm curious then, do we have to compensate our hydration strategy because of the introduction of caffeine? And it's not just in our bottles. You know, we have other kind of like chewables and foods and these products that we can buy from these companies where they have caffeine infused within them. So, I mean, I don't have any affiliation with them, but I love the product. I use Scratch, and that's my electrolyte mix, and I have like their chews and stuff, and some of their chews have caffeine in them as well. So it's not just like you're getting caffeine somehow, but I want to know if I have to compensate my hydration strategy because of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it kind of depends on how much caffeine you're consuming. In general, like let's just take somebody who's maybe consuming a little bit in like coffee beverage in the morning, like me. I don't consume it sometimes during exercise. It just depends. I usually sort of do that more for races, but I do consume coffee or like iced coffee, but I'm also consuming fluid in that. And so in general, if you're only consuming, I don't know, 150 to 200 milligrams of caffeine, you're probably not needing to have a lot of, yes, it can be a slight diuretic, but you're also drinking fluid. And as long as generally your fluid intake throughout the day is pretty good, I wouldn't worry about having to like consume more fluid. If you're taking in like a lot of caffeine, like a large amount of it, like during exercise, I suppose there could be some level of that's contributing to maybe more fluid loss through urination, just because it is a diuretic, meaning that it kind of stimulates the body to pee more, to lose fluid. So, maybe, but I don't know if I have like an exact like science on that. Like, oh, well, for every 1,000 milligrams of caffeine, you need 8 ounces or something like that. It probably has some contributing factor, but I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, maybe drink a little more or make sure you're hydrating enough the rest of the day to make up for it. But I don't think I'd be super worried about it, honestly. Like, I don't know if it's like as much fluid, like that's going to have any hugely significant detriment, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about it. I think the biggest thing with caffeine, though, and this is just real quick, and maybe this involves a separate sort of topic on it, is just like making sure that, yeah, fine, consume the caffeine during, before and during the exercise if you're exercising in the morning. But caffeine can have a pretty detrimental impact on our sleep. And the half-life of caffeine is like 6 hours. So if you're consuming it for like an afternoon workout or something, thinking, oh, yeah, I need to jazz up, I've got to be ready for this workout, can actually significantly decrease the quality. So you may be like, I'm so tired, I'm going to sleep, and the caffeine doesn't affect me. It probably is impacting the actual quality of your sleep. You're just able to sleep, but the actual deep sleep and REM, or the types of sleep that you need to get a restorative sleep, will be impacted in a negative way. So just make sure if you're consuming caffeine, yeah, maybe you just need a little extra fluid during the day, but you don't have to be like, I don't have any like measurement for that. I just think it's probably not a huge amount, so don't worry too much about it, but just make sure you're not overdoing caffeine later in the day, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So yeah, nothing to be overly worried about, unless you're like, if you're consuming it just like all day long, and there's probably more things to worry about in that situation.
You have other issues that you need to resolve if you're using it all day long.
If you're using it all day long,
caffeine is the least of your concern.
Yeah. And the fluid loss, that's the least. Like, you probably need to figure out why you have to have that much caffeine to like whatever make it through the day. I think that I hope that helps. Oh yeah, there's a few other questions I think we want to address, and I think probably, I know we're kind of heading into a longer episode here, but what do you, I don't know if you want to touch on this, but I know you had asked, or one of the ones that you had wanted to address was the nutrient absorption. And so we talked a little bit about this, but dehydration in particular, like, I don't know if do you want to, I can't remember what that question was. Did you want to?
Yeah. What level of we know that some level of dehydration can cause the body's ability to absorb nutrients in the stomach can be hindered. So I'm kind of curious now on if we can talk about, talk about dehydration to a certain extent in terms of, the body's inability to absorb nutrients within the stomach, because this is really relevant when it comes to carbohydrate and calorie consumption during a race, which, is energy management. And so if you're not on top of your hydration strategy, that can significantly impact the effectiveness of your nutrition strategy. And as a coach, I make that distinction with my athletes. I was like, we have a hydration strategy and we have a nutrition strategy. They go hand in hand. They're not the same thing. So I want to make sure that if one is off kilter, it's going to affect the other one. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's true. If you're if you're measuring your basically dehydration is just how we determine that is like the percent of fluid loss. And so the only way to really get to that is, again, weighing yourself before and after and seeing what the difference is there and how much percent, body weight you've lost. So in general, if it's like 2% or less, and that's pretty common, for most athletes, you're going to sort of usually end somewhat fluid, you're going to probably have some weight loss, especially if it's hot. What we want to do is aim for having the dehydration be no more than 2% of body weight loss, because when we start to see that, it does have other perceived effort, and just ability to regulate body temperature starts to be a concern. Concentration and focus is a concern. But once we kind of get to moderate dehydration, this is where this becomes more concerning. And so that's when more noticeable issues start to occur with performance, ability to regulate body temperature, but also as we get from moderate to severe dehydration. So moderate's like 2 to 3%, and then severe or significant is beyond 3% loss in fluids or body weight loss during exercise. And that's where GI upset can become a real concern. Basically, like what can kind of happen is when we start to get above that 2% or around that more significant body weight loss, have less fluid. And so there's less like blood volume of fluid. And so the body then so this is already happening during exercise. We already have this blood flow thing where we take some of the blood flow that we're using for digestion away from the gut, right? So because blood flow is going to the muscle. That is much more significant when we're dehydrated, because we now have less blood and the blood volume is lower, and the body is going to take a little more of that blood flow away from the gut, because it's like, this is not my priority right now. Like, this gut stuff isn't my priority. And when that happens, you have even less ability. The body's not prioritizing absorption and digestion. And so you're much more likely to have GI issues in that situation, because there's less the emptying, so the actual the ability for the food to make its way through the gut into the intestines is slowed, and the ability to absorb is slowed or decreased. And then so you're putting food in, and it's not getting absorbed. It's not getting through the system and getting absorbed. And that's where we run into a lot of GI distress. And so, yes, absolutely, having a significant amount of dehydration can impact. And that's why in the heat, it's hard sometimes for people to consume food, because especially the further they get into a race, the less likely especially things like solids, which take a lot more energy, and just breaking that down into like digestible or absorbable units is harder by the body. So you're going to have a lot harder time with solids and things that are harder, take more to digest. So, and people experience that. And so that's, I think, why you want to obviously stay hydrated. So you don't want, but that's sometimes hard to catch up, or in a very hot condition, to be able to stay on top of hydration. And so that's why sometimes I recommend, especially during hot races, to sort of have more of the solids, the harder to digest starches, like early on in a race, and then sort of move to more liquids, move to like easy to digest sugars. Probably by the marathon, really, honestly, like in an Ironman, you may only be able to tolerate like soda and I don't know, just drink the thing, liquid carbs. And that is absolutely okay, because that's all the body can tolerate. And that's probably okay too, because that way you're getting more fluid, right? Because you're also consuming fluid with some of that. So just keeping that. And the other thing too, I want to make sure to mention is that one risk too with being extremely dehydrated is gut permeability. So this is can be problematic when athletes experience gut symptoms, not only during the race, but also afterwards. So we have these very tight junction cells that are very tightly together in the gut. And what happens when the blood flow is not getting to the gut like it should, it kind of causes those tight junctions to kind of move, to be the cells kind of essentially move apart, and it allows this space in between. And sometimes that can cause issues, not only with I don't know, gut, just maybe diarrhea or issues like that. But if that happens and then we're getting things into the gut that shouldn't be getting into the gut, that can also cause other issues. So that's a whole other topic, that whole gut permeability thing. But just something to think about is just in general, we just don't want that to happen too much. So I'm trying to stay hydrated. Another good reason for that, right?
Yeah, the reason that I kind of wanted to talk about this is because I've seen other posts on social media where athletes are saying, I'm trying to, consume these products and this food, but, I'm having GI issues. And so what they tend to do is they say, well, I must not be able to tolerate. So they consume less and they start to consume less. And then all of a sudden performance drops off because they're not able to fuel properly. So it's not that you can't take in that nutrition. It's just that you may be dehydrated, to where your
Maybe,
body
yeah.
can't absorb it. So it's not that, hey, it just doesn't sit
Yeah.
right with you or whatever, which could be the case. I mean, that
Right.
could
And
be
that's why
that could
like
be a
gut
valid reason,
training the
but
gut is another
yes.
thing, another whole topic is like that's why you kind of have to sort of train it a little bit. So you can't be like, "Oh, well, I heard somewhere I have to take in 80 grams or whatever of carbs an hour. Let me go ahead and try that." Probably not a good idea because then the gut's just not used to that. So it may not just be dehydration. It just may be that, no, actually, like you haven't been taking in anything and you can't go from nothing to 80 grams an hour of carbs. Let's just start at like 30 and maybe try a few different things and see what sits better. And then we're going to slowly work our way up to whatever you can tolerate. And there's usually something somewhere where people just can't tolerate more than that. And that's probably, if it's really low, then I kind of work on trying different products and kind of figuring out what might be going on there. But yeah, I mean, this is really just, I mean, yeah, obviously if you're going into your workout dehydrated already and you're trying to consume nutrients but this is really going to impact you like during a race. That towards the end of the race, you may notice this more, and that usually is because of dehydration. So if you're, there's certain reasons why you might not tolerate certain foods, but that's more likely to happen maybe during a race where you start to not tolerate towards the end, or it's hot out and you're not tolerating things. It's probably something to do with fluid, sodium, all the balance of all that, just heat in general, just like decreased appetite. There's so many things there. But yeah, sometimes when someone's coming to me and they're like, I'm not tolerating this while I'm exercise, it's just kind of digging in a little deeper to say, okay, is hydration optimized? Yes, I think it's just a matter of you needing to like take it slow and work your way up and train the gut a little bit more to tolerate things. That makes sense.
I'm absolutely convinced that this is what happened to me in my first Ironman. So I did Ironman Chattanooga as my first one, and this was back in like 2018 or something like that. And I was halfway through the bike, and my stomach started to churn a little bit as I was trying to take in my electrolyte drink. And so my immediate conclusion was like, my stomach is shut down now, so how am I going to manage the rest of this race without taking in any kind of like nutrition, because I was afraid that I was going to get sick. So I'm absolutely convinced now that my stomach issues were probably driven from some level of dehydration, either going into the race or I was performing at an intensity level where I could not keep up with my fluid loss, and I couldn't drink enough in order to stave off dehydration. And then because I was dehydrated, my stomach, the blood was being drawn to other places, and it was a warm race. And so, my body's trying to cool itself, so it's drawing blood from the gut to the skin to try and cool it. And now all of a sudden, there's less blood volume in the stomach to help with digestion. And so I'm absolutely convinced, and I wish that I had understood this going into that race. I know that my race day would have been definitely better and different, because the day after the race, I still could not eat anything. I would eat stuff, and I would get nauseous, and my body was just trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And I'm a firm believer that this is what happened.
Yeah,
so,
you had some maybe like gut permeability. I mean, you had some combination of all of that, and yeah, that's pretty common, I think. And so this is why it's so important to really practice and all the hydration and the fueling and all of this prior, and really getting this so you don't go into those situations. Obviously, it's hard to keep up with fluid and when it's hot out, and so sometimes that's where we have to be like realistic with our expectations of stuff too. But and not that was your problem. It's just all of this, thinking about all of the different things going into the race, and like, okay, when I want to make sure I practice this. I know I have a plan, and I am aware of how much I need, and I don't know. It's just I think that's very common. So
I think it's helpful if you're self-coached and you're trying to figure this out yourself. It's a lot to try and to figure out.
Oh, yeah,
but if you are actively being coached by someone else, and your coach is not talking to you about nutrition and hydration, and all they're doing is like giving you like workouts and stuff like that, then you need
Either that or
to
they
go to
need
your
to
coach
be-
about this, because
yeah.
this is a
Yeah,
huge
'cause
piece of the puzzle.
unfortunately, not all coaches have experience with this, though, because I mean, they might have their own personal experience, but not every coach has like a background in nutrition. So
Right.
either they're helping you through this because they maybe do have some sort of background in nutrition, or they're at least able to address it and help you through it, and that's great. Or at least they're recommending you go see a sports dietitian that specializes more in endurance exercise too, because that's probably the best place to go. But I understand if you don't have like money for it, it's also something to look into is just through insurance. It's surprising. I mean, a lot of insurances actually cover for like a certain basic amount of nutrition visits, and they don't necessarily have to have it be because you're sick with something. So you might be surprised too what might be covered if you have a fairly good insurance. So maybe looking at that, because obviously coaching won't be covered, but sometimes you can actually see like a sports dietitian. I take insurance through various pathways. If you wanted to look into that, there's options, right? So not every sports dietitian takes insurance, but it's just something to think about, because you might be able to actually get this type of information covered, even though it's not really necessarily, helping prevent disease. But, that's all stuff I talk about too with people, is just general healthy eating and things that are just going to help them live like a good, healthy life. So it's not just about this, but I just think just looking into it, finding ways to get some help with this through your coach, or going to see like a sports dietitian, and taking some of that guesswork out so you don't have to sit here trying to figure this all out for yourself. Having someone coach you through that is very important. And I think for anybody who wants to compete in these types of like endurance races, like why not? Like set
Yeah.
yourself up like from the beginning with somebody that can help you, especially if it is covered and you don't have to pay for it, but like just why not? I don't understand why people have sort of a like, oh, I'm just going to do this myself. I'm going to Google it or something. It's like, well, that good luck, I guess. I mean, that works for some people, but I
The
think
internet,
having
the
some
internet
help,
is filled with incorrect information. So,
I know, right?
so buyer
Or just
beware.
like, yeah, just unhelpful or contradictory. And there's so many people that come to me and they're like, I went on and I looked for this information and it was so contradictory. Like this one source was saying this and this other source was saying this. And then I was like so overwhelmed, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That's probably happens a lot to most people because there's a lot of contradictory information. And something I do is just kind of taking each individual as they are and figuring out their history, what's worked, what hasn't, whether it's like a detective, or just someone said detective work, a little bit of trying to figure out what people are doing, what's going on, asking those important questions. What are they eating day to day? How are they hydrating? All these questions, and then coming and helping that person from a personalized approach, versus like whatever you find on the internet is not personalized at all, and it's probably contradictory and sometimes incorrect. So yeah, I mean, why not seek some help? I think, but if you're curious, you can always reach out to me, and I'm always happy to kind of tell you those different avenues you can try to go through to like maybe meet with me if you want to try insurance. But I'm not trying to like make this into like come in. Of course, I want to meet with people. I want to, that's what I do for a living. But like I think it's more just like I'm here. Like this is what I do. This is my passion. I have education in this area. Like if somebody has that much background and they can help you, like why not go seek that advice, I think. But anyway, I don't know if I think there was like one last question we have. I know we're kind of running into quite a bit of time here, but this is all very important. I hope even though it's a longer episode, people are like,
I can't even see the number. So where are we at
no,
right
it's just
now?
there's like what? Okay, so the last question I think you had there, because I think we covered. I know we kind of create like an outline a little bit to kind of give us an idea of what we're wanting to make sure we get everything.
We're
but
about
I think
an hour. Are we about an hour and 40 minutes in? So we might.
So let's do
we might end up doing is splitting this up into two episodes. So if you started listening to this and you feel like the conversation didn't end, it did come to a conclusion, then next week we'll bring you the second half. So it'd be
we
like
might say that
to be continued kind of thing. So
I think what we might do is break it up, and then we'll we'll explain that. We'll do
Yeah.
like a little snippet or something. But I think the last question we had that we wanted to address is the you wanted to kind of ask about the electrolyte preloading. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of elaborate on that, or what were you?
Yeah. So one thing that I
curious?
do when I work with athletes is as part of their plan, I'll put in, because I use Training Peaks. I'll put within Training Peaks, like during the week of their race is when I say, hey, we need to start considering preloading some electrolytes, and you might be going into race day feeling a little bloated, but if this is going to be a hot race, you're going to thank me later. I'd much rather you go in a little bit bloated and then do being able to manage the race more effectively, rather than feeling lean and thin and, not bloated. And then all of a sudden now you have to drink more and try and intake more during the race because you didn't preload it. So the body is really good at storing these things for a reason.
I mean, it can. Yeah, it can. I mean, obviously we have,
let's
like
talk
I
about
mentioned
that.
before, the body regulates it a little bit. So if we take it in, it does more than what we need. It can release some of that through urine, but I do think there is some benefit to like preloading the electrolytes. We want to be cautious not to be like, oh, I'm going to like load a bunch, like take that, like, 5 elements like right before or
Right.
something, because that's like a little too much. That's where we can run into like that hypernatremia, that high sodium concentration where we're just overloading. But I think what I generally recommend is like the day or two before, just making sure like you're drinking the fluids and drinking like an electrolyte mix in there, like just adding some electrolytes to your water, like generally. And then maybe like the day before in the evening, you could then have like a full 1,000 milligram or 500 to 1,000 milligrams of electrolyte mix, a little higher concentration. Sorry. And then in the morning, you could again, before you start, maybe even a full like maybe I would do like a full or half a thing of the element. So I'm just preloading it. And also you have to remember you're not exercising as much because you're usually tapering. So your sweat rate goes down. So you don't want to overload it, but I think having a little bit more helps because it does. That additional electrolyte can kind of draw a little bit of fluid in. But yeah, so you might feel like, oh, not as lean, but you're also kind of then a little bit pre-hydrate. Like you're then when you start your race, you may also have a little extra water on board, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either, because then you're kind of maybe less like you're less likely to maybe get yourself dehydrated as long as you're drinking enough during. I mean, obviously that's not going to be enough you have to still drink during the race and hydrate. But yeah, I don't think there's anything kind of wrong. In fact, I think that can help, because then if you don't happen to get enough sodium throughout the race, you've kind of preloaded it a little bit. So it does help to ensure you're going to have enough and you're not going to hopefully end up in that hyponatremic or low sodium state. So yeah, definitely something I would recommend. I just think like when I say that, I think sometimes the tendency for people is to be like, well, if a little bit's good, a lot must be really good.
No.
So I'm going to do a bunch. You know what I mean? Don't do that. Because I feel like sometimes I always have to put that out there. I don't know. There's just this tendency, right? People are like, oh, I'm going to have, she said to have it, like, I'm going to go ahead and like take a bunch of this in, and I don't want you to do that, so it's just a little bit, and there's no science behind it. It's just kind of like, taking in a little bit more, or at least trying to, in the few days before, just keep that electrolytes in your water going, and you're exercising less, so then that naturally will kind of preload some electrolytes, right? Because you're not losing as much in your taper, you're not exercising as much, so you're not losing as much salt.
Yeah. So
sweat.
my strategy that I used in my last race was, 2 days before the race, drank 1 bottle of electrolyte mix, like my standard bottle. And then the day before the race, because I knew it was going to be hot and humid. And then the day before, I drank 2 bottles.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was able to consume it 1 in the morning and then 1 kind of like in the afternoon. So I wanted to try and be done with that bottle by like, say 4 o'clock, because I didn't want to be drinking it in the evening, because then I'd run the risk of not getting a good night's sleep because I'm having to go to the bathroom. I didn't feel like fit. I felt a little bit on the heavier side going into the race, but I am absolutely 100% confident that I had a better race because I preloaded. And I
Yeah.
don't think that I could have kept up with my sweat loss,
Right. That's
during the
hard. Yeah.
race, so it was my insurance policy, against,
Uh-huh.
things that could have gone wrong if, I can't, because there's only so much that you can drink and try and take in during high intensity exercise.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I mean,
so
you
if
can't
you
always
can
match it
preload it ahead of
perfectly.
time and, kind of like stock the shelves a little bit, why wouldn't you? And this isn't just relevant for races.
Well, that's
If
what
you
we do
know,
carb loading, right? Like
yeah,
people
it's the,
carb
it's the
load.
same
It's
idea.
same similar ideas like that. And so even with carb loading, because you're taking in more carb and really loading up your glycogen, you're retaining more fluid because with glucose in the cell, also we retain some fluid with that, water molecules with the
Yeah.
glycogen. So it's like, well, actually, that's probably helpful too because you're also having a little fluid in there, sort of, and then that helps because you're already have that fluid. So as we break down glycogen, we also have fluid that we're not losing, but it could be sort of. I mean, it's not a ton of fluid, but it could be sort of a way to think about also preloading some being super hydrated, I guess.
And if
But
you're a long course athlete and you're training, then the same principle applies for your long sessions, like let's say on the weekend. So if you have like, a 5 to 5.5 hour bike ride bike session that you have to do on Saturday, which is going to be followed by most likely a long run on Sunday, then it makes sense, and it's going to be hot. Even though you're not racing, the preloading methodology should be relevant then as well, because
yeah,
you don't want to dig too deep of a hole from the bike session and then go into your run a little bit on the dehydrated side. So let's say Friday, maybe you have, an extra bottle of electrolyte to kind of stock the shelves a little bit more
right,
for
yeah.
your long
You're
session on
just
Saturday. And then hopefully that will stave off, some
And
level of
it's like getting
dehydration for
used to
Sunday.
that feeling too.
Yeah.
Like that's why I recommend people practice carb loading in when you do like a race, maybe that is in preparation for your A race. Do a practice the carb loading because you're not gonna. It is gonna feel like you're a little bit heavier, maybe a little bloated, or just You're retaining a little maybe extra water. You're not feeling super super lean and light. But I do think once you get going in the race, you're starting to lose some of that fluid and because you're sweating and then everything kind of works out. And I think being used to that sort of feeling helps because I think psychologically in a race that can be like, oh no, I feel heavy, like things don't feel quite right. But knowing that that's just kind of part of how you're going to feel right in the morning, but once you get started, you actually feel pretty good because everything's kind of working its way
Yeah.
out and some of that extra fluid is being released. So it's like it's just being used to that, and so trying that in training, just like everything, like with the fueling, you need to practice it in your training or in races that are maybe your B or C goal or C race or whatever it is, like your races that are like your A race, right? And you're like practicing that out in those scenarios so that when you get to that race, you know exactly like this is kind of how it feels, but I'm used to it and I know it's going to go away. And I've done all these things to prepare and I know how this feels and it's going to really help me through the race, right? So you're not like doing it and like on the race morning and then being like, oh my gosh, I feel so bloated or I feel like I'm so
Yeah.
much heavier or something's off. And then it's causing you to be like freak out, that's not going to be helpful. So just that reminder too. All of these things we talk about, like this is all stuff you're working through and figuring out weeks in advance,
Yeah.
months in advance. Like you're practicing, you're trying the hydration, you're trying to figure out the sodium stuff, like all ahead of time so that when you get to that race, you have a pretty good strategy. And you've also kind of worked through, well, if this happens or I start to like lose the ability to absorb, I'm going to turn to these liquid calories and you have like this like because nothing goes perfect, but maybe you've had all these scenarios that you've tried and things have happened during your workouts and you kind of know how to work through some of those challenges, like, but rather than waiting to try all this like the week before you have your race is just really not going to work out very well for you generally. So that's just like
I've heard
everything.
some recommendations where it's just like, oh, you don't have to really practice your nutrition strategy until you get like 4 to 5 weeks out from your race. But I think that is really bad advice.
It's like you
Because
should be practicing this all throughout.
yes,
Obviously if you're just doing like an hour long run. But like we said before, sometimes even practicing the nutrition during some of your higher intensity runs, even if they're like an hour, can be helpful because you know what it's like to take something in when you're doing something higher intensity. So even though you're not really, the purpose of that isn't really to like, oh, you like, it's maybe not going to necessarily help you during that session. It's just helping you be able to see, do I tolerate this? So
Yeah.
that all should be happening, I think, several weeks. As soon as you start your training cycle of like 12 or 16 weeks out, that should be when that is also coinciding with nutrition. And if you're a seasoned athlete, you probably have a general idea of what you need, but you still should be practicing this and doing this in your training just to keep up with that. We do lose the ability to tolerate like our gut just because we've been able to build up that tolerance for a race. If we take a period of time off, our gut may become less tolerant. So we kind of have to almost retrain the gut every time we do like a
Yeah.
training cycle almost. So it's not like, oh, I trained my gut last time. I'm just gonna wait, 4 weeks out and try all this. I just don't think that's a great idea. I don't think that
I mean,
information is helpful.
I can tell you right now that I'm already practicing nutrition strategies now. And I mean, I have Ironman Florida, the 70.3 coming up in December. My training, I still have one more week before my training officially starts, where my plan starts. But I've been training my gut now for like a month. And I said,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to try and consume, I'm trying to get up to the 60 grams of carbs an hour. And now I've kind of graduated up to like 65. I'm trying to get up closer to 70. And so I've already started before my training has even started. I'm still training, but it's officially, hasn't started yet because
Yeah.
I want the most amount of time that I can possibly have to find out what does work, what doesn't work, because I don't want to get 3 weeks before my race and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I found the guardrail and I've only got, 3 weeks to really kind of like figure out where I should be. I want to have that kind of like nailed down because the way that I kind of view the gut is it's a muscle. We train muscles for swim, bike, and run, and weightlifting is like we're trying to get stronger muscles. But if you think of your gut as a muscle, it's something that has to be trained. It's something that has to be worked. And if you stop training it, it loses that memory and it loses quote unquote fitness. And then you have to kind of like retrain it over again.
And
So
it takes time. It doesn't
it
happen usually
does.
in 4 weeks. It's not like it's like you're training 12 weeks for this race and you have to train your muscles in your body to get to it's like similar for the gut in a way. Like you don't want to wait. It's like waiting 4 weeks before your Ironman to start training. And I think, that's kind of the way
Yeah.
I would talk about it. It's like,
It
that's
sounds
probably not a
absurd,
great
but yeah.
strategy. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, don't do that, with your nutrition either. Like you should, besides like things sometimes don't work. And so it can take a while to try, especially if you're new to the sport, to try different products. Like that's what I tell people is like, this is your opportunity to just buy different things, maybe through some source that you can buy like individual things and then try them and see what you like, what you tolerate, what, I don't know, just different hydration strategies. It just takes some time. And so I just don't think even 4 weeks is enough to be able to actually try different things and experiment enough. You need a little more time. So I hope people don't read or try, 4 weeks is not enough. Definitely right before the race is definitely not enough time.
No.
Thinking about this be months in advance or as soon as you start your training plan is probably adequate. Yeah. And obviously the more experience you have, the less likely you need to like try different things, but you still need to be doing this during training and continuously like adding the carbs in and so you can tolerate it, like you're saying. So it's not maybe as much work, but you still need to be doing it in the training as you start your program so your gut is ready to go on race day.
Yeah.
For sure. So yeah, I feel like we covered, I'm looking through here, I feel like we covered pretty much everything. I think the only thing that maybe I would want to mention is just we talked a lot about during exercise, just in general for hydration. If you're looking to hydrate, throughout the day, there's some general like recommendations for staying hydrated. I think first and foremost, the way I would calculate this is like you have your general hydration needs is what I'm going to mention here. And then anything that you need outside, like the training itself is going to be added onto this. So this is just like generally to hydrate if somebody were sedentary. And then for your hydration needs, you're adding the exercise pieces in addition to this is not covering everything, right? So in general, like a way to sort of calculate this is about 30 to 40 milliliters per kilogram, 40 on the high end, but I mean, then you'd have to obviously like calculate that into ounces or whatever you want to use for measuring. That's just a general recommendation. Some people do like half their body weight in ounces. That may work for some, but obviously somebody who's heavier, that's maybe be a lot of fluid. But you know, it's hard to kind of like, oh, this is exactly what you need. It's just general recommendations. And so then you're taking that amount and that's just what you need to hydrate throughout the day. So I do think it's important to stay hydrated all throughout the day. And so knowing kind of what your general needs are going to be important. And then whatever you're doing before, kind of during and after exercise is in addition to that. So let's say you have 80 ounces that you need throughout the day, then you need to be consuming whatever amount you've determined you need during exercise in addition to that. And so then your hydration need, that'd be your total hydration needs for the day. And I think like, yeah, definitely just, you know, drinking water. But I think that we already mentioned like having some electrolytes in there. In my blog post, I'll set some ideas for how those people who like me have a hard time just drinking water. Like I have some cool little recipes that I created using like the electrolytes like element and just some cool little like hydration like tips to get more and to be able to drink more when you're not a big water drinker. And so I'll kind of include that. I don't want to talk about that too much here, but I just wanted to mention that too. So it's not just during, it's what you do all day long also. And yeah, I think that kind of covers most of that topic. I don't know. Can you think of
the only other thing? Yeah, the only other thing that I can think of is I've heard some people kind of like make references like, you know, if my workout is only, you know, 45 minutes, I just drink water. But if it's longer, like, you know, if it's an hour and a half, then I start to consider electrolytes. What are your thoughts on using duration of your training session as criteria for determining whether you should use electrolytes or not?
That's a good question. I think in general, like if it's an hour or less, you probably don't need to drink anything, but you could have a little bit of water or you could have a little bit of electrolytes. Like if you're training, it's hard because it's like when in the heat, like this time of year,
that's the one thing that sticks in my head. It's like it depends, not just on the intensity,
water or anything in the winter. I'll just go out for my run and it's 45 minutes to an hour and I don't have any fluids with me, but I might be drinking some before and after. Obviously, in the summer, I always have like at least my 14-ounce handheld water bottle, and I put ice and water and electrolytes in there, you know, and I have that even for 45 minutes sometimes because it's like hot or it's an hour. So it probably depends a little bit on the heat and also how is that like what you're training for. So if you're doing like, if you're only training at the max duration is like an hour long of anything that you're doing, you probably don't need as many electrolytes as somebody who's out there for much longer. Because again, remember, you may only be losing like a liter or two of sweat, and then you may only be losing, you know, depending on your sweat rate, how much that would be per that hour. And so you might be able to like get those electrolytes adequately in throughout the day, and you may not need to like have a bunch during exercise. So again, it depends kind of on the temperature, the time of year, and what you're training for. If that hour is like your shortest thing that you're doing, it's like easy, but every other day is a lot of volume, you know, maybe you should still take electrolytes in because every other day you're doing a ton of work. It's just another opportunity to kind of stay hydrated. But yeah, so I think that's where it gets a little complicated because it can be hard to sort of address that for each individual person, like what they need to do. But that's how I generally kind of think of it is like generally if it's an hour or less and it's not super hot out, you probably don't need to be taking in a ton of electrolytes, maybe just water. If it's cool, you maybe don't even need to take water. You just drink before and after and have some electrolytes throughout the day.
One of the approaches that I use is I don't even use duration as a barometer for whether I should take just water or electrolytes. I base my decision purely on what are the conditions that I'm going to be in for that training session. Because what's the worst thing that can happen is that I
Right.
drink too much electrolytes, so I ineffectively use electrolytes. So I
Right.
gotta buy it more often. Okay, the way that I view it is like dehydration is cumulative. There's a cumulative
Mhm.
effect. So if you're a consistent athlete and you're consistently training, it's not that, I didn't drink enough for, session A, which was only 45 minutes. Now what do you drink for session B the next day? All right, did you
Mhm.
drink? Did you underdrink? Did you overdrink? And now session C.
Yeah, especially if you
As you
compare to your
roll
height.
through the plan, dehydration accumulates. And so, why not just err on the side of caution and just say, hey, if it's hot and humid, I'm going to drink it. If I don't need it, my body will get rid of it or my body will store it and use it tomorrow. So
Right.
that's
Yeah,
the
and
way
I
that
think
I
that's
kind of view
true.
it.
Yeah, and it's like I have sometimes a hard time staying hydrated the rest of the day because I get busy. So it's like, why not take that opportunity to have that water with me? Because I know I'm going to be kind of thirsty. Like when I'm out there, I have a tendency to keep drinking it because I do kind of need it on a hot day. It's like, why not take that opportunity to to stay hydrated better rather than do that full hour and maybe lose a little bit more fluid and then struggle to stay hydrated the rest of the day, then I'm even more dehydrated, like you said,
Yeah.
going into the next day. So I kind of see it as like an opportunity to kind of keep up with your hydration. Why not? Like, why not have fluid during and why not have a little bit of electrolyte in there? And the amount you have may depend a little bit on the scenario and how hot it is, but just take the fluid. I don't know. Stay hydrated. Stay up
Yeah.
with your hydration because there's no benefit. It's not like doing like a run where you're, "Oh, okay, I'm going to try to do this run like slightly glycogen depleted to get my body." Yeah, you don't want to do that often, but there might be some benefit to like getting your body used to being in that state. And so you know what it feels like and all that. But dehydration is not like that. You don't want to you don't want to put your body in this situation where you're dehydrated to be like, so I'm prepping, or it's not doing anything to help you. There's no adaptation you get from being dehydrated. It only
Right.
affects your health. It's not good. So don't think, oh, I'm gonna like practice being dehydrated so I know what it feels like, or there's no benefit to it. So just stay hydrated. Just work. I hope that makes sense.
Right.
Whatever you
It
do that
does.
you need to do to stay up on your hydration, do it. So take that water with you, take the little bit of electrolytes during your 45-minute run, and then just be on top of your hydration better. Nope, I don't see any problem with that, right?
Yep. Perfect.
So perfect. I think we covered all of it. I mean, yeah, we'll probably break it into a few because it is longer, but I think I didn't. I was like, oh, hydration. There's not. I'm like, that will be an easy one. Like, there's not that much to talk about. And then the more I was looking into it and putting in some of the things I wanted to talk about, I was like, oh, this is maybe going to be a little bit more
Yeah.
than we anticipated, and that's fine. I hope we covered like so much that everyone's like, yeah, that was like. Hopefully it's not like over too much, but I think it's just
Well,
enough that everyone's like, this, it covered everything.
this effectively could be episode 14 and 15 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. So we may be splitting this up a little bit in order to respect everyone's time.
Yeah.
Because
And then you can look forward to the second half of it.
There it is. We'll put a little bit, maybe I'll throw in a little AI generated voices like to be continued next week.
Yeah, we'll do something like
so,
that so we can explain what's
pretty
going
cool.
on. But yeah.
All right, so
Well,
yeah,
thanks.
we'll wrap this up. So this was episode 14, maybe /15 as well, of the Endurance Athlete Journey, where we talked about all things hydration. I am your host, Coach Justin, along with Coach Katie. And Katie, do you have any last comments?
No, I don't think so. I
No?
feel like I have nothing to add.
I think we're good. All right, so again, thank you guys for listening. We do want to do a couple plugs here at the end. So we have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group on Facebook. It's a private group. If you want to get in on some of the additional conversations that take place, I'm considering throwing out some more content just to that group. I've been pushing out content, internet wide. And so I'm thinking about shifting some of that stuff into the group. So I highly encourage, if you're listening to the podcast and you enjoy it and you like the conversation, you like the content, to join the group. It's a simple, just one question that you have to answer and we'll let you right on in. So we appreciate that. Also, if you do like the content that we're coming out with the podcast and you enjoy our conversation and our topics, feel free to leave us a rating on whatever platform that you're listening to. I know I listen on Spotify, but if there's Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, or what have you, leave us a rating, if you want to throw in just a couple of comments, that'd be great. We love the feedback. We'd like to know what you guys think on the content that we're coming out with and ways to improve. Or you may say, hey, this is a mediocre podcast. No, enough just to be dangerous. Hopefully you don't feel that way, but if that's the way that you feel, we would appreciate any kind of comment and any kind of rating that you have.
Yeah, it would be helpful.
I can't think. We do, shameless plugs. We are coaches, and we both run our own coaching business. We just came together to create this podcast. So if you have coaching, if you would like to reach out to Katie for coaching, whether that be run training coaching or nutrition coaching, you can go to fuel2and run.com, and you can check out her content and reach out to her. If you'd like to talk to me about triathlon training or just single sport, swim, bike, and run, you can go to tabularasaracing.com and you can reach out to me. Both of us have spaces on our athlete roster, so we're actively taking on new athletes. So other than that, I think we've done enough of the marketing and the shameless plugs. Yeah. We should probably move this to the beginning rather than waiting to the end of it, just to get it out of the way. But housekeeping. So again, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate the time that you spend with us. And again, we'll see you again next time on the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye, everyone. See you, Katie.
Bye.
Listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Send Coach Justin and Katie an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.